Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. We're with Dr. Cyclone, our Sentinel, who has about just under a million XP to go to get to level 39 in our next set of enhancements, our next set of slots. And we're on the Path of the Dark story arc, so we're going to go to Fault Line. And as we go today, I think we're just going to talk about probably one thing. So I won't write up any bullet points. So a friend of mine was at the there was some sort of a post that somebody made. I think he made. This is the guy that's been like shadow banned a bunch of times on the D&D Beyond forum. So he made this post on the D&D Beyond forum. He told me to go read it, and let me see if I can find what I actually came up with. I couldn't see it because it's been shadow banned. But I found three topics on the D&D Beyond forum that I thought I would like to discuss, something to sort of rant about with you guys. And hang on. Where is this? There you go. So we're going to find Bentley Berkeley. So the first topic, which is what we're going to do today, a person named One Sonono One asked, I've made some characters for campaigns that fell apart early or one shots, right? So I've made some characters that I used in some campaigns, and those campaigns fell apart early or they were one shots, and so the characters fell out of use. But I put a lot of work into making them, especially for the campaigns that failed. I guess not for one shots, right? You wouldn't put a lot of work into a known one shot. And I really wanted to play them. Is it bad to reuse characters from a dead campaign in a new campaign, in a different campaign? I would never want to be disrespectful or rude, and sometimes I have characters that really just didn't get justice in a campaign that got cut short, so would this be okay? Um, is it okay to do? My answer is no, and I'm going to explain why. Um, it's not no in the general case of, well, you made up a character, you never got to use it, you do use it someplace else. The reason I say no is this line. I put a lot of work into making them, and I really want to play them. I put a lot of work into making them sounds to me like main character syndrome, right? It sounds to me like you're considering that character to be this really important thing that you want to play exactly as written. And the question is, well, is that character, even going to fit into the new campaign? Now, people um, in the thread did say your character needs to be appropriate for whatever campaign you're in, so I agree with that. Um, but my concern is beyond like whether the thing is appropriate. Is are you so in love with this character concept? Like, think about what this means. If you're going to play Dr. Cyclone in a Champions game, let's say, right? And, well, Champion's a bad example. Characters don't die in Champions. So you're gonna play a cleric. I don't know, um, uh, John the cleric, and you're really excited about playing John, and you get into a campaign and it ends in a session, and you're disappointed that you didn't get to play John. And now I'm running a new game, and you decide to play John the cleric again because you want to play him. Well, what are you going to do if he dies in the first session? You didn't get to play him then either, right? And now as a GM, am I meant to feel bad because I know that the reason you put John into this campaign is because you wanted to play him and you never got a chance. And now if I kill off your character, you're still not going to have a chance, right? So do I have to like go easy on you now? Right? And I experienced this partly my own fault, largely my own fault. I experienced this with my best friend in the D&D game we played in Rome, right? He had this pre-existing character that he loved so much, and he had never fully been able to play the way he wanted. Even though he was in a Champions campaign with him for, I believe, a fairly long time, and a D&D campaign with him as an NPC character, I think my best friend was the GM, for a long time. And he played him in 2 different video games with me, Neverwinter Nights and Divinity Original Sin, 1 or 2, I can't remember which one. I think 2, I can't remember. Oh wait, I forgot the other hallway. Even though he'd played him all those times, he felt that each time he never really played him right and wanted to play him again. But the character was not in any way, shape, or form designed to fit into Rome, right? And because he was a pre-existing character with a pre-existing concept, my best friend, I don't think he really wanted to change the character in any major ways to make him fit into Rome. That's not my concept for Hassan, right? And, you know, because I had suggested him playing Hassan when we thought we were going to be in somebody else's game before I took over as GM. So the story is, a colleague of mine at work said, I'm going to run some D&D. I want you to be able to play it, because I'd been saying I'd like to play it, but I don't have anybody to play with. And I said, can my best friend join us? And he said, sure. And a couple of other people were going to join us. And then what happened is that guy could not do the GMing, and I said, okay, I'll take over. So the original world was going to be the Forgotten Realms. And so my best friend wrote up a Forgotten Realms. Well, he wrote up an origin for a generic fantasy world, right? Like, it would have fit anywhere. He created a custom village, and that's the village that Hassan came from. And then, he had whatever his background was, that Hassan's mother or parents showed up at this inn and left their baby with the old lady who owned the inn, who became his nan, his grandmother, essentially, adoptive, obviously. And then they fled, and he doesn't know why they fled. And so what my best friend wants to do is, discover the secret of his character's mysterious origin as the gameplay commences, right, during the play. And so when we and so it was sort of just a generic, the idea, any generic fantasy world it would work with. But the Rome world I made up isn't a generic fantasy world, and one of the things is the kinds of names that he created for his characters aren't Roman names, and we were using Roman names like Gladius, Cornelius, Satanicus, or something like that, right? I remember one of the characters' names was Tertia. Tertia means you're the 4th born daughter, right? Another guy was, his last name was Aurelius. And so, I posted the naming conventions of ancient Rome and how you did it. And everybody, with the cognomen and the nomen and so on, and if you know how that works, great. If you don't, I'm not going to get into details. Just trust me, there was a certain set of conventions for naming people in Rome. And every one of my other players followed it, and my best friend ignored it and just made up not only his own character's name, but all of the sort of off-screen NPCs that he invented as part of his origin story. Same thing, right? He didn't change that. Even calling his nan, right? Why wouldn't you email me and say, well, look, how do I translate nan into Latin, right? And I could have given him some suggestions, because she was Roman, right? So she would have had a Roman name and not have been called Old Nan, right? That's British nanny, and so which derives from other languages if it's British, but yeah, it wouldn't have been called that, right? And so this is my concern when somebody's saying, well, I'm in love with this concept, right? Are you going to be willing to change the concept, parts of the concept, to fit in with the new campaign? Are you going to be so in love with this concept that when I make suggestions for you to change it, you're going to say, but that's not my concept? And are you going to be so in love with the character that I can't allow it to die now? And so my concern isn't, can you reuse a character concept? My concern is, are you so in love with this character concept that you're allowing that to override the campaign that you're in, right? And this brings us up to a concept that I'm going to type in here. which I've talked about before on this channel, which is, as a player, are you character focused or campaign focused? What do I mean by that? Someone who is character focused is playing in a campaign to allow them to experience their character. They're using the campaign as the vehicle through which they get to experience inhabiting that character. Okay? And they really don't care what campaign they're in. My best friend was as willing and able to play Hassan in Champions, in Neverwinter, the Forgotten Realms, in Divinity Original Sin, and in Rome. Have character will travel. Have concept will travel. Right? Like which campaign he was in didn't matter. He played that character the same way and made him mechanically similar. He was a luck mage, basically, like a fate mage. Right? And he did this in every single one of his playthroughs that I know of. Now, I don't know exactly what he did in his Champions campaign because I wasn't there. It happened when we were not living in the same town, and he did it with a different group of people. But I assume he played him the same way because he did it every time he did with me, right? So this character, he's just using Divinity Original Sin or Neverwinter Nights as a mechanism by which he gets to inhabit and play Hassan. The campaign, in this case, is essentially irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the character and your ability to play it. That's a character-focused person. A campaign-focused person is the opposite, right? Or maybe the converse. I don't know the right way to say that. I think opposite. A campaign-focused person is using the character as a mechanism for experiencing the campaign, right? The character is the vehicle I'm using to play Divinity Original Sin. This character is the mechanism I'm using to play City of Heroes. I really don't care whether it's a Sentinel or a Scrapper or a Tanker or a Brute. I might care if it's a Defender because I don't tend to like playing them, but I'm campaign focused. So every character I have, what do I say in the 20s? I want to play Scroll of Tieleku. I'm using the character as a method, as a vehicle by which I get to experience the story arc that I like. Right? So my focus has always been campaign focus. Right? The character is a playing piece that I'm using to play the game and experience the campaign. Right? And that's why when, like, the one guy from Winnipeg ran a Critical Role world-based short campaign, I went into the Wildmount book and I used the rules in the Wildmount book to build a Wildmount compatible concept of a character that fits in perfectly with Wildmount and fits in with the world. Because my goal was to experience the campaign and the world and all of that, and the character was just what I was using to experience that campaign. So in a sense, it doesn't matter what the character is. What matters is what the campaign is, and does the character fit, right? Remember, I've talked before about how my best friend wanted to create a storm cleric and didn't like any of the gods that were in the Forgotten Realms for the storm because they're all like evil and chaotic, and he wanted to play a good character, and so he wanted to have his character worship Thor. And when he asked me about like the origin and what I thought of it, I said I don't like it, and he said, "Why?" Literally like that, right? Why, with all those question marks, like stunned. Why? Why don't you like this really well written background that I wrote? And I said, first of all, it sounds like Storm because they're like the NPCs in the village. And you don't get to write what the NPCs in a village are doing. You're not the GM, but in his backstory, they saw her as the quote unquote daughter of the storm, and they worshipped her like a goddess. And she was seen as kind of like the heir of Thor or whatever. I don't know. And I said, it's too much like the character Storm. I feel like you're copying X-Men. And he was like, oh, I didn't even think of that. But I said, that's one problem. But the second problem, which is much worse, is what does this have to do with the Forgotten Realms? Thor is not a Forgotten Realms god, right? You're supposed to be playing Princes of the Apocalypse. And yeah, I said this, I think, just in my last episode. Maybe. Or did I say it in the last episode? A recent episode. Like, what I did was, when he was telling me this, as he was telling me this, I went online to D&D Beyond, and I went to the place where you could purchase Princes of the Apocalypse. I didn't buy it, but on that page, on that little web page, they have the blurb, right? What you would read on the back cover of the book that tells you essentially what the adventure is about, and it's near to a town. I think it's called something like Daggerfall, or I don't know. It starts with a D. Let's call it Daggerfall, right? It's a town in like central western Faerun, and so in 5 minutes, while we were having this like chat discussion over text on Google Plus or whatever it was at the time, I looked up where in the Forgotten Realms this takes place. I found the name of the nearest town, and I said, if it were me, I would just be a cleric from that town, right? It gives me an in-world reason. If that town is being threatened, which is what the blurb implied, by the elemental evil temple that's in the Princes of the Apocalypse, I think so, then my character, who's like from that town, would have a reason to protect it just because her family and friends are there. And I don't need any other reason to go on this adventure, right? And that would be an in-world reason. So I read the campaign and said, okay, what I would do, because I have a campaign focus, and my goal is to experience Princes of the Apocalypse if I'm playing this game, what I would do is I would have made up a character from that town that is specifically designed to want to go on this adventure in character, because her homies are being threatened, right? And so, and he was like, yeah, but that's not my concept. Like, okay, but your concept doesn't fit the campaign. This is just a cool idea he had to be the daughter of the Storm, probably because he likes Storm, the X-Man, which, I mean, I do too. I like Storm. But I don't think it's appropriate to make her up for a D&D game, especially when the Forgotten Realms doesn't have Thor as a god, right? Not that the Storm in the X-Men has anything to do with Thor. They're different characters. But in his origin, they did. And so this is where you're recycling a character that does not fit into this campaign because you want to play it so badly. And that's where you have to be careful, right? If this guy had said, I never got to play it, and I don't feel like making up a new character, it'll be easier for me to do this. Okay. As long as it fits, right? If he said, look, I made up this paladin a while ago to play in a campaign that fizzled out and never happened, and the players want me to play a paladin. Can I go take this one and use him? Yeah, but that's not what he said, or she. The person who made the post said, I really like this character and I really want to play it, and that means I don't care what the campaign is. I care that I play the character. And that's where you get into trouble, to me, because nobody else at the table cares about your character. I've said this over and over and over again in various different episodes of this channel. You are the only person at the table who cares about your character. The GM, by definition, probably cares a little bit, but not as much as you do. And nobody else at the table cares about your character. They don't care. They don't care about your origin. They don't care about your missing girlfriend. They don't care about your adoptive parents. They don't care. about the missing heirloom from your backstory. It's not their character. You don't care about their character. They don't care about your character. It really is sort of like class with me and my students, right? As a student, you care about your grade in my class more than I care about it, because I have 49 other students in this 50 student class. So I can only give about 1/50th or 2% of my attention to you, because the other 49% is with, or the other 98% is with the other 49 students. Hung up there. Right? So I can't give you 100% of my attention. I can't actually even give you 2% of my attention, because I've got another 50 student class, another 35 student class, and another 24 student class. When you add that all up, I've got about 150 students to worry about this semester, and that doesn't count meetings and committees and stuff. So I can only give you 1/150th of my attention. I can't give you any more, because the other students get the rest of my attention. Each gets the same amount. Right, so the GM at the table, if there's a GM and 4 players, the GM can only give you 25% of his attention at the table, because the other 75% goes to the other 3 players. And he can't even give you that much, because a whole bunch of it also has to go to the NPCs, the world building, the rules, and everything else. Right? So the DM can only maybe care 10% about your character as much as you care about it. Right? The other players at the table are like the other students. There's 50 students in the class, you and 49 other people. Nobody cares what grade you got on my exam. Nobody cares. And they certainly aren't going to get upset if you fail. Like, I mean, maybe if your best friend is in the class, they might get upset, right? Or your boyfriend or girlfriend. But for the most part, you have a bunch of students who are maybe acquaintances with each other, if that. And those students only care how they do on the test. I have actually had a student say this to me, right? The first semester I was here, which is 20 years ago, 19 years ago now, in 2007. I had a guy who was in my general biology class for non-majors. It was an easy class, but he was failing, and he was failing it because he missed the lab final, and they were a combined grade, because it was the week after Thanksgiving, and he decided not to come back until finals week. So he didn't come back the last week of classes, which was the week after Thanksgiving. So he got a 0 on the lab exam, and the lab coordinator refused to give him a makeup because he didn't have an excuse, right? He just didn't bother to come back. He gave himself an extra week of vacation, which you're not allowed to do. At least you're not going to get makeups if you do it. And then he flunked one of my other exams, and so he needed to get a 99, I think, on the final, or 98, just to get a D. He ended up with a 41 at the end of the semester, lowest grade in the class. Okay? There were about 7, there's an 85 student class, there were about 7 or 8 Fs. Higher than his 41, but below a 60. Who deserved the F less than he did, because they actually took all their exams, worked a little bit, and, got 5 or 10 points more than he did. He literally had the lowest grade out of 85 students and the lowest F out of the 7 or 8 people who failed. And he came into my class, into my office, and he said, look, I'm not a bio major. I really don't care about this class. I really don't want to have to take it again, right? And for general education requirements, as long as you get credit, which is anything but an F, and in those days they didn't have pluses and minuses in my school. They just had an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F. He asked me, can't you just give me a D? It's still a bad grade. It's below a 2.0. It's a 1.0. I just don't want to have to take this class over again. And I said to him, if I did that, it wouldn't be fair to the other students. I would have to leapfrog you over like 7 or 8 other people who got higher grades than you did, but still got an F. They got higher Fs than you did. And he said to me, I said, wouldn't be fair to those students. And he said to me, I don't care about them. I only care about me. Right? That's your role-playing group. I know you guys are friends, and he was talking about strangers. And maybe they care a tiny little bit about your character. But for the most part, that statement holds for your role-playing group if you're playing at the table with a bunch of other people. They don't really care about your character, your backstory, your saving throws, and they don't care. They care about their own character. That's why, think about it, that's why power gaming happens, guys. Because what are power gamers trying to do? Be more powerful than the other people at the table. They want their character to be better than yours. If they cared about your character, they wouldn't be power gamers because they wouldn't be trying to make their character better than yours. Right? They're essentially trying to beat you. They don't care about your character. Power gamers are evidence of that. Cheaters and min-maxers and all the rest are evidence of that. And there are lots of game groups that have somebody in them that do that. Well, why was the bad Rob always trying to be the star of the show? Because he only cared about his own character. He didn't care about my character. He didn't care. If my character died, he wouldn't have cared. He might have role-played that his character cared, but he himself wouldn't have cared as long as his character was nice and powerful and beat up Galactus solo. He wouldn't have cared if Galactus killed my character. Right? And it's not just, oh, he's a jerk. No, that's the reality. You took the time and effort and energy and care and love to make up this character and craft it and do your own character sketch and go out and buy a miniature and paint it or pay for it on Hero Forge or what have you. Right? That is... you're the only one. You did that for your character. You care about your character. Are you kidding me with this? 48% chance to hit, and didn't I miss just like 6 times in a row? It's just ridiculous. Nobody cares about your character. Nobody is paying any attention to what your character's doing. They don't care. Right? And so you get this person who's like, I care so much about this character. You do. Nobody else does. And now you're going to take this character that you made up for a totally different campaign in the Forgotten Realms, and you're going to put him into Dark Sun, which doesn't really fit. And you don't care that it doesn't fit because you only care about your character. You don't care about the campaign. You don't care about the other characters. You don't care that what you're doing doesn't fit with the other characters. Right? It's selfishness. My problem with the character versus campaign focused paradigm is that it's selfish. Because if you're focused on your character and what's best for your character, you're not focused on what's best for the campaign by definition. And you're certainly not focused on what's best for the other players and their characters. So there's a selfishness to this. The proper way to do role-playing games is actually to be more selfless. It's how you end up with a good game group. If people actually are more willing to work on behalf of each other. I'm not talking about they're still not going to care about your character. But if they're willing to make up a character that's not the main character, the focus, you'll have a better group. So my argument is that you should not be sitting there going, I want to play a character that I made up before and I never got to play and I love him so much or her so much. Because that's going to essentially make you have main character syndrome. Right? I mean, that's what you're expressing. I have a main character that I never got to play out. I want to play it here. I'm not talking about a character class idea, right? Like, for example, in D&D, of the character classes that are out there, probably the two that I would like the most would be the monk or the barbarian. I like melee characters, and I love martial arts guys. Right? Barbarian's like a brute, monk's like a martial artist, like a scrapper, right? Love that kind of archetype. So those would probably be my two faves. And then I can't remember what I liked within the two, what subclasses I like within those two classes. There's a monk subclass that's kind of assassin-y. I don't remember the exact name of it. But yeah, I like that subclass, and I thought it was a cool idea, right? And so I could see saying, well, having looked at the classes and stuff in 5th edition or 5.5th edition D&D, I like the mechanics that seem to be present in this particular subclass or this particular class, right? And therefore I want to play. I made up a barbarian, and I'm bummed I didn't get to play it. Not this particular barbarian that I fell in love with, but just this particular class. I like paladins, right? So let's say I make up a paladin, and I don't get to play him, and I say, well, I'd like to play a paladin in this game, but not necessarily that paladin. I just would like to try playing an Oath of Devotion paladin because it looks like a cool mechanic, right? I feel like that's totally okay. Because that's not a character focus, that's just, it sounds like a fun mechanic, right? But if you're talking about, I want to play Sir Thomas the Paladin, who was an orphan and got adopted by this elf, right, in a world that doesn't have elves, or something like that, that's where it becomes problematic. So my feeling on this is it's okay to have a character type that you want to play. Like, I want to play a scrapper next. After I finish this character, I haven't played a scrapper in a while, I'm going to go play a scrapper. That's fine, right? But if I'm in like a roleplay guild and I say, I want to play Silver Phoenix, and Silver Phoenix isn't appropriate for that guild for some reason, then I shouldn't be playing Silver Phoenix. I should be playing something appropriate. Back to the Barbarian, right? After looking over the classes, the one I thought I would like to play the most was the Barbarian, and I can't remember which subclass. Why but the Barbarian? Because I wanted nothing to do with magic. And I was just going to take stats and maybe a few feats, and, I didn't look too far ahead, but it was like, yeah, I just want to get like a two-handed axe, or maybe an axe and a shield. I can't remember what I was planning. I think it was a two-handed axe. I think I was going to take a subclass where if you don't have a shield or armor, you get some kind of bonuses. And I was like, yeah, I think I'll do that. That's easy. And if I make my character really strong, I won't have any encumbrance from the shield and the armor, and I'll be able to be like the mule and carry stuff for the group, which is something that always need somebody strong enough to carry stuff for the group. And yeah, I can do that. And it's a nice, simple thing. I'll hold the inventory. I'll take care of that. It's bookkeeping I can do easily. And I'll let everybody else be the face of the party and do all the other stuff. So that's what I was thinking. And I had sort of a vague idea. I had like 3 or 4 ideas for. I was thinking of maybe doing sort of a Conan-esque character, but I was like, that's been done a lot. I was thinking of maybe doing a Red Sonja type character. I was always a huge fan of Red Sonja. I was like, she wasn't going to be redhead like Red Sonja, but I was going to make her like. My thought was to make her kind of like a Russian character. I can actually do an okay Russian accent, and so I thought I could do something like that. And but it was probably going to be somewhat inspired by Conan and Red Sonja anyway. But that's kind of as far as I got. Just I can do a Russian accent, and it'll probably be a female barbarian. Depending on what sexes, what genders the rest of the players pick. Because if everybody else picked like a female, then I would make a male just to be different. If it was more than half the party was female characters, then I would have made a male just so that we could have some gender parity. When I was, I'll get back to Barbarian in a sec, but when I played Champions with my friends, I often made female characters, and I can't remember who it was that hadn't been with our group for a while. I was like, why does Scrapper always make girl characters? Why does he always make females? And the reason was that all my friends, other than my friend Dave's younger sister Jessica, who played with us one summer, everybody in our Champions group was a guy. And in role-playing games, generally, I thought I saw stuff coming from over here, but I guess not. In role-playing games, in those days at least, generally, most players kind of play themselves, right? And most guys played guy characters, and most girls who played girl characters, right? And so, so most of my friends were playing guy characters, and we had a lot of male characters. But in the teams that we used to read about, like the Legion of Superheroes and the X-Men and the Avengers, there were lots of female characters. So it didn't make sense to have a team of 6 superheroes and they're all men. So usually, either my best friend or I or both of us would make up a female character so that there'd be at least one girl on the team. Dave did it once, that I recall. The good Rob, I don't remember him ever playing a female player character. The bad Rob did once, that I remember. Once or no, a couple times. Yeah, the bad Rob did it a couple times. I remember in one of the groups, each of us played 2 characters, one male and one female, and that kept it 50-50, which, that's kind of the way, superhero groups in the 80s were set up, is they had roughly half male and half female characters. And that's what I was doing, right? So I often played a female. And so similarly with my, Saturday morning group, which actually we're supposed to play in a few days after this recording, Deadlands. Now that group is all female characters except one male, and the only male character is being played by one of the 2 female players. Both male players are playing a female character, and then the one female player is playing a female character. And I think she's almost always played female characters, other than one shot. I think she just doesn't feel that comfortable playing the opposite gender, which is pretty normal in role-playing games. My point being, again, campaign-focused, one of the things I look at to decide whether I'm playing a male or female character on a game group is how is the gender balance. If there is more of one gender, I'll play the other gender to bring it into parity, right? I have no problem playing either or. As you guys have seen, right? I've done both. So, back to the barbarian. So I told my best friend, who I don't know what his idea is, and I'm not sure what idea he has that would make this true, except maybe some kind of a Game of Thrones political intrigue campaign, but I kind of feel like he would have mentioned that he was going to do that if that was his plan. But he said, at one point he said, so what are you thinking? What kind of character do you think you would want to make up? And I said, well, I try not to do, I don't do what he does, right? He's very frequently, he makes up characters, and, just like this guy, I'm going to make up a bunch of characters that I think are cool, and then I'm going to try to find a way to play them, character focused. I don't do that. Like, same thing here in City of Heroes. I don't go making up whole bunches of characters. I have a handful of characters that I created to try to reserve a name, but other than that, I don't go around making up characters, because like if I'm playing this guy and we're level 38, right? And if I go into the character creator and I make a scrapper, like a Spines Regen scrapper, as soon as I make that character, I'm going to want to play it. Okay? And not, somewhat in City of Heroes, but much more so in D&D, where you have to spend a lot of time in your creating. Here, all you're doing is going with the costume generator, which doesn't take that long, and then you just pick the first power and the second power, and then you're in. So character creation is very quick. But in D&D, you have to roll up a bunch of stats, you have to pick your skill proficiencies, your feats, and so on for first level. It takes a good deal of time and a lot of thought, at least for me. And then what'll happen is, once I've made up the character, I'm going to want to play it, right? So I said to him, well, I haven't really made up any characters up in any detail, because then I'm going to want to play them, right? And it's a good thing I didn't make up something I really wanted to play, because that was a conversation we probably had 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago, and we're playing Deadlands now, and I never got to play that character. So imagine how frustrated it'd be after 2 years if I had made up some kind of a Shadow Monk, I think that was it, and gotten all excited to play it, and now I can't. right? So he said to me, "So, well, what kind of what class do you think you'd want to play?" And I said, "Well, I looked at a couple. I really like melee characters. I was looking at monk. I was looking at rogue and everything. But I think my top choice, like I'll play whatever nobody else is playing. But my top choice, if I had, because what I said is I have a few ideas, right? My thoughts were rogue, monk, or barbarian, and I'll play whichever one the party needs, whichever one we need, right?" But he said, "If you had your druthers, what would you pick?" And I said, "Well, if I could pick whatever I want, I think I would probably pick barbarian." And my best friend said, "Well, a barbarian wouldn't really fit in the campaign." Okay. So I said, "Oh, well then I guess I'd do a monk or something, or I'd do something else." I immediately was like, "Okay, cross barbarian off the list. I guess shadow monk." I had a list of like my top choices, and I'll just go down the list as people are saying what they want to play, or in Discord or whatever, and I'll just cross off the ones that are already taken or that don't fit in with the party, and whichever one as the highest one I've got on the list, just by class and subclass, nothing else made up. That's what I'll make, right? Campaign focused. Whatever fits in the campaign. Whatever fits into the party, whatever fits in the campaign. So when he said, "Well, a barbarian won't fit in with the campaign," I'm like, "Okay, cross it off the list." Okay. That's a campaign focus. Now, the character focused people out there, and the irony is my best friend's a character focused person, and I could almost hear him saying this. "Well, if I really want to play a barbarian, you should make it fit in your campaign. Change your campaign." I don't say that, right? I have a hard time picturing what about a campaign could he could do. Let's get on the ground so we can get our mez defense. What about that campaign, other than maybe political intrigue, would make it so that a whole entire class, not a subclass, but a whole entire standard character class, would not fit in that campaign? Seems like a weird statement. I didn't ask any further. I just said, "Oh, okay. Well, I'll do something else." And he said, "What's your second choice?" And I said, "Probably some kind of a monk." And he said, "Oh, yeah, well, that would probably fit." Right? But I mean, I don't know. Like, I didn't ask why it wouldn't fit because I didn't ask what his campaign was about. Because I feel it felt like he was still trying to keep it a little bit of a secret. Spoilers, trying to avoid spoilers. I don't know. Might have been spoilers to explain why it wouldn't fit. I didn't ask questions. Right? The GM told me that this character class doesn't fit. I mean, as a game master, I would say not only does he have the right, but probably the responsibility in the session 0 or pre-session 0 or whatever, when he puts out his campaign information document or whatever you want to call it, his little house rules, he should say the following character classes are banned. Bullet point 1, barbarian, right? And then I won't think about it, right? Sorry, that's a banned class. Now, people don't like the word banned, right? I got to talk to my contact. People don't like the word banned, and they don't like it because it hurts player agency. But whatever idea he's got in charge in store for the we are doing this, okay. Whatever he's got in charge in store for the campaign, a barbarian's not going to fit. Okay, that's good information. I'm glad I didn't try to make something up and fall in love with the character, because now I'd be upset, right? That's why you have to be careful when you have this character focus, because now I would be upset at him that he's not letting me play this character that, as this guy said, I really fell in love with this campaign, this concept I really want to play. I didn't have a concept. I was just spitballing character classes, and he said, "Well, a monk might fit, but a barbarian wouldn't." Okay, I'll play a monk. Not a problem. Now, I don't know why, right? And I have to admit, there is a part of me that's very curious as to why a barbarian, a whole class, standard basic D&D class, not an unusual weird subclass, would not fit into a campaign. And it seemed like the campaign world. Like now, maybe he's got a world that doesn't have a barbarian culture in it, and so there wouldn't be anywhere for my character to be from, right? That's possible. Again, the only thing I could think of is a Game of Thrones style political intrigue where you're like having somebody who's just a brute force guy that smashes through doors and beats people up with an axe would probably not work. But even there, I feel like there are characters in Game of Thrones that are pretty much physically focused and go around beating people up. You'd think it would actually be kind of. I mean, if he said, well, it's going to be political intrigue and you're not going to have a lot of room to beat people up, I'd say, well, I mean, if he doesn't want me to play a barbarian, I won't. But from my perspective, that might actually be a super fun campaign to play a barbarian in because it's sort of like the bull in the china shop, right? My guy would walk in and I would purposely play a character who's kind of stupid and bull in a china shop and is just going to try to go in and solve every problem with brute force, not quote unquote not realizing that that problem cannot be solved that way. In fact, the other idea I had was instead of creating this female barbarian with a Russian accent, in fact, I think maybe I got this idea first. One of the ideas I actually fell in love with as a concept. Again, this isn't anything specific about the character, right? It's just a dumb barbarian. That's it. I don't have any like origin story or anything like that. But I'm a huge fan of the Seinfeld show, and I'm a huge fan of David Putty, Eric Warburton. Right? I love his voice, and I love the way he plays Putty. I just think Putty is hilarious. And I have this idea of playing a character who's basically Putty, David Putty, right? Yeah, that's right. Right? And just basically doing the same kinds of like half-wit stuff that Putty does. I feel like just having Eric Warburton's Putty as a guidepost for me to roleplay, I could roleplay that thing to the hilt and have a lot of fun doing it. So I would get a kick out of playing a David Putty type character in a campaign that's supposed to be all like intelligent and mystery solving and political intrigue, and have him just be just completely clueless and getting himself into all kinds of trouble. Like I would absolutely love that. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that was the first reason I was like, I want to do a barbarian, because I wanted to do, I want to do that. I want to like act out a David Putty type, just somebody dumb, right? Now, that can fit into any campaign, unless you absolutely can't have a dumb character. I mean, even if you're playing ETU, where you're playing college students, you could still play a dumb jock of a college student who's like the captain of the football team or something, but really bad at math and English. Right, and doing a bad job and always trying to cheat on tests and stuff like that. Right, that's probably the type of character I would not play a straight A character, because that's what I was like in real life. Why would I want to play myself? Right, so I would probably play the dumb jock who's always trying to cheat on tests and cut class and go to frat parties and get drunk. All the things I didn't do when I was in college because I was too busy being a good student and being straight-laced and everything else. Right, and so So yeah, I mean, I think it'd be fun to be David, to do a David Putty barbarian. I think it would be absolutely hilarious. I told a friend of mine, and he just started laughing. He was like, "That would be incredible," and it would be really funny. And so yeah, I would think that would even work in a political industry campaign. But there may be some other reason why barbarians are not appropriate in his world, right? Like maybe there's no culture that produces barbarians. I don't really know. I never asked, because the campaign, like, I didn't see the point of asking, because I didn't really think the campaign was going to happen, and I was right. So I just didn't ask. But remember, the point here is that I was campaign focused. So even though I really liked the idea of playing a barbarian who's like David Putty. I think it'd be hilarious and a lot of fun. When my best friend said that won't fit my campaign, I was like, okay, I'll do something else. That's a campaign focus, right? I want to do what's best for the campaign, not what's best for me personally, right? And what you have to realize as a player in a role-playing game group that plays regularly every week or every 2 weeks, what you have to realize is that the selfish part, where you're like, I'm going to do the thing that's best for me personally, is very short-term based and damaging long-term, right? In the long run, you will have a better time by not doing what's best for you in the short term, but by doing what's better for the group in the long term. So long term, maybe the group needs a tank, you play a tank. Long term, maybe the group needs a healer, you play a cleric, right? So yeah, I had barbarian and monk as my top choices, and then maybe rogue. But if nobody wanted to play a healer like a cleric or a bard, I would have done that, right? I'd probably be a bard rather than a cleric because I kind of like bards. But yeah, I would do that too. Like whatever you need, I'll do. And the group as a whole would have more fun if I played my fourth choice, which is a bard, when we needed one. Then the group would have as a whole if I played my first choice, because that was going to be quote unquote more fun for me. Think about it this way: if we don't have a healer and my bard is the only one, I'm going to be playing a character who is critical to the party, a linchpin of every bit of success we ever have, and probably going to be MVP of the campaign, because you can't do without healers in D&D. You can't. You really need one. I mean, the GM could put a bunch of healing potions in, but most of the time, clerics and bards, the healer characters, are the MVP of the session, because people would have died without their intervention. And so yeah, by being collaborative with the other players and playing the class we need instead of the one that was my first choice, I might have a lot more fun, because my character will become a really integral part of the party instead of being the second of 3 barbarians. Right? So yeah, my answer to can I play a character that I fell in love with when I started a campaign and then the campaign ended and I didn't get to play the character is I recommend against it. And if I had it to do over again, I would have told my best friend a couple of things. The first thing I would have said to him was, you're not making up your own subclass. Use one of the existing ones in the book, or don't play sorcerer if you don't like the existing ones. You're not making up your own subclass. Nobody should ever make up their own subclass. Cody, I think it was Cody from Taking 20, he was talking about this, about like homebrew and stuff, and he said, first of all, he said, don't use homebrew in your game unless you make it up. Don't let your players go to D&D Beyond and download some homebrewed thing. The stuff on D&D Beyond is not balanced. And it's certainly not balanced for your game. But he said even worse, never, and of course I'd already done this, but I'm watching his video like 6 months later going, I wish I'd watched this 6 months ago. He said never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, allow the player to make up their own homebrew. Their own magic item, their own feat, their own skill, their own subclass or class. Never. Never do that. He said because it'll be unbalanced, and like then when you try to balance it, they're going to fight with you over it because they made it up, right? And so they think it's good. So he said, yeah, just don't do it. Just stay away from homebrew. Don't do it unless you made it up. And he's right. So the first thing I would have done is say, no, you're not making up your own subclass. The second thing I would have done would have been to say, for these unknowns in your backstory, like you don't know what happened to your mother, you don't know what happened to your grandma, like why your mother was being chased or whatever, no, you can't give that to me, you have to make that up. Or take it out. That's not my job. It's your job to figure out your origin, right? The third thing I would have said to him was, your stuff isn't Roman enough. Please make it more Roman. And the fourth thing I would have said to him, what was the fourth thing I was going to say now? Wait a minute. I'm not making it up. It's not Roman enough. There was another one. You're not doing your own subclass. Oh, yeah, your character needs to have a reason to go on these adventures. And I can't find my mommy is not a reason to go on adventures that have nothing to do with your mother. So you better come up with a reason why your character wants to, like, this is a campaign about saving the Roman Empire from destruction. So you need to make a character who is motivated to save the Roman Empire from destruction. Literally everybody else did that, right? The new girl made up a gnome who was a Roman citizen. I'm listening for glowies. The cleric was a Roman citizen. And when the Finland girl joined the group, she made up a character who was a Roman citizen and ex-member of an optio in the Roman army, a retired officer, who also had spent her life defending the Roman Empire from enemies. So everybody else liked the Roman Empire. They were a citizen of the Roman Empire and wanted to save it. Hassan was a non-citizen from Egypt and didn't give a darn about anything but his mother or his girlfriend. And he was friends with the other party members, and he eventually started to care about them. But I think this is why my best friend kept saying, "Oh, you need to give us more quote unquote hooks into the story because our characters need to care about them." Like, no, I didn't have to do that for anybody else because everybody else made up Roman citizens who care about Rome. You're the one who made up a character who cares about your mother and your girlfriend, and any adventure that's not about them, you don't have any motivation within your character background sheet and stuff for why you would care about it. And it's not like it was a secret that the mission of the party was going to be to save the Roman Empire from destruction. We said that at the beginning, something like that. I don't remember exactly how I worded it, but we said that at the beginning. You're fighting the enemies of the Roman Empire, right? So now, again, my best friend is not entirely to blame. I allowed all this. But if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't. I would say, A, you need a reason to be willing to help the Roman Empire because that's what this campaign's about. B, you're not giving me the job of making up what happened to your mother. You're making it up. Or at least figuring out why they were after her and stuff, because he left that all up to me. And I had a devil of a time figuring it out. C, you're not making up your own subclass, right? And D, you have to fit your characters' names and backstory and everything more into the Roman Empire. I wrote a whole bunch of stuff about what it was like in Rome and what our world is like, and he pretty much ignored it and just did what he wanted, right? And then just put enough in there to make it sort of superficially fit, right? He just took the names from the Forgotten Realms and substituted Nemesis and Rome and Egypt first for those names. And I should have said that's not enough. You need to make it more integrated into my campaign world, you know. But again, that was on me, right? He did what all players do, right? He tried to get away with something or whatever you want to call it. He tried to get away with what he wanted, right? And as the GM, it was my responsibility to say, I'm not letting you get away with that. I'm not letting you do that. And I didn't. And that's on me. I gotta tell you, I'm loving these AoEs. So yeah, guys, my advice is to be campaign focused, because if you're campaign focused, you're never going to do anything that ruins the campaign. If you're character focused, you might. If you stick with the campaign focus, you will be much more likely to increase the pleasure at your table for everyone, and that will include you. If you're campaign focused, then you're not going to take an existing character. You might take the existing stat block, like a certain class, certain attributes, and the skill, because, well, I already made it up and I'm making a barbarian anyway. I'll just take the one I rolled up and rename him and make a new origin for him that fits in the campaign. Thumbs up for that. That's okay. But when you're saying I really want to play this character that I made up for another campaign, this person, in all of its particulars, including character flaws and backstory and everything else, I want to make this guy up because I really put a lot of work and effort and love into it, and I love this character so much and I want to play it, that sends up red flags for me. Because then, am I allowed to kill it off if that's what the situation calls for? Or are you going to get mad at me if I kill off this character? Be very careful about falling in love with your characters. Because it makes, if they become precious to you, then you're not going to be willing to put them in danger. And think about my like putty idea. I'm sitting there going, I love the idea. I think it's hilarious. I'm in love with this idea. I want to do it at some point. But I also am totally on board with him. In fact, I would prefer it if, being very, putty-ish, ends up getting him beaten up or thrown in jail or whatever. Like, not only wouldn't I mind that, I want that. Because that would be part of the fun of the character. That he keeps getting into trouble. Same thing if I'm playing like an ETU character who's like a jock who doesn't study and cheats on his exams and goes to frat parties and stays out late and takes tests hungover. I want him to get Fs. I want him to do bad grades, maybe even fail his midterms and not get an advance, because that's the fun of that character. If I wanted to get A's in everything, I'd make up a straight A character. Right? If I wanted to play a precise fighter, then I'd play a monk. But this sort of brutish barbarian who talks with a Eric Warburton kind of a inflection and kind of just bulls his way through every encounter and thinks every solution, every problem can be solved with the edge of his battle axe, that sounds like a really fun character to play and get into trouble and get arrested and get punished and get fined and be yelled at by the rest of the party because he screwed everything up. And obviously, out of character, I'd say, guys, do you mind if I pull out my axe and start going to town here because that's what I think this guy would do, but I don't want to ruin your fun, right? I'm not going to be a wangrod about it, but I think that that kind of a character would be funny. But if he got killed, whatever, I'll make up a new character, right? And I think that's the attitude that one should bring to the table in D&D, and certainly classically the attitude that people brought to the table in D&D, and I think that will hopefully be the subject of our next video. The subject will be whether D&D is changed irrevocably from what it used to be. But we'll talk about that next time. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and until next time, I'm Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes.